So rule 3 deals with general situation. So general cases. How? Point of taxation, when does the tax liability arise? That is normally, generally, there are two important parameters. Number one, date of issue of invoice, and number two, date of payment received. Because service tax is payable, service tax liability arises even if you receive the amount in advance, even though you have not provided any service. So on agreement towards the services provided or to be provided, or to be provided, already provided, you have to issue invoice, and to be provided, no issue. Still, if you receive money, you have to pay service tax on that portion. So service tax is payable, service tax liability arises. Service tax liability according to rule 3 arises. General rule, either on the date of issue of invoice or date of payment received towards the services, whichever is earlier. So it is whichever is earlier principle. Date of issue of invoice or date of payment received, whichever is earlier. These are two things. Suppose you have received money in advance, so tax liability arose. Or you have not received any advance, but you have completed the service. And the moment you complete service, you have to issue invoice within 30 days or 40 days if you, as per the rules. As per the service tax rules, read rule 4. As per the rules, service tax liability arises, service tax rules, rule 4, 5, 6, these deal with the basic things. Rule 4, of course, 4A, rule 5 and rule 6, these deal with the basics of the service tax system. So as per the service tax rules 1994, invoice, date of invoice has to be issued. Invoice to be issued within 30 days of completion of service. Within 30 days of completion of service. In case of banking or financial institution. In case of banking or financial institution, it is to be issued within 45 days. Within 45 days. It is to be issued within 45 days. 45 days. Within 45 days. It is to be issued within 45 days of completion of service. So this is the requirement. But here the rule says if the invoice is not issued within the stipulated date, then what happens? See here, obviously tax liability should arise and would arise on the date of completion, because I have completed my service. So on that same day service liability should have arisen. But lawmakers were a little liberal. There is some grace period. What is that grace period? That grace period is, they say, we will wait till you issue invoice. So the grace period is till the date of issuing invoice, service tax liability doesn't arise. So that, what is that grace period? 30 days, but there is a time limit. within 30 days of completion of service you have to issue invoice. And in the case of banking and financial institutions, so it is 45 days, because they will be a little busy and it will be heavy, they will be having very heavy work, and probably, and they have been given relaxation. In case of banking and other financial institutions, they can issue invoice within 45 days of completion. So 30 days or 45 days, as the case may be, that is the cooling period or grace period. After that, so on that date of issue, the tax liability arises, not before, that is the cooling period. But you will be foregoing, you will be losing that cooling period or grace period if you don't issue the invoice within the time frame. If you fail to do it, suppose you have service, you have provided the service on January 1st, completed service on January 1st, and till 31st January you have not issued any invoice. So the benefit will be gone. So on the date of completion itself, the service issue is set to be invoiced. See, let us look at this. See, service completed. Service completed on 1st January. Invoice issued. I am not dealing with banking financial institutions, others. And invoice issued is 25th January. Amount received 5th February. So here the service was completed and thereafter invoice issued and thereafter amount received. Means these are in sequence, and within 30 days the invoice was issued. So this is very important. From the date of completion of service, they are in sequence. All the three events are in sequence. So date of completion, date of issue of invoice, and date of payment. This took place on 1st January, and this took place on 25th January, and this took place on 5th February. So date of issue of invoice or date of payment, whichever is earlier, that is the principle, basic principle. Because the invoice has been issued within 30 days, means within the due date, no default. So here this becomes irrelevant, and this period, say from 1st January to 25th February, 25th January, this is the cooling period or grace period. So tax liability did not arise here, tax liability arose here. So this is the grace period, you can say. Tax liability is arising here, not here. So you can enjoy the benefit for 25 days. You have taken 25 days. And tax liability arose here. And from this particular point, you have to make the payment. Service tax is payable. Let us assume that you are a company, you are paying monthly for easy understanding. So on 25th January, tax liability arose. So for the liability of January, you have to discharge by 6th of next month, that is February. This is the due date. So if you fail to make payment on this due date, what is happening? If you fail to make the payment, obviously you are liable to pay with interest, and there may be penalty also. Under service tax, the penalty is somewhat severe. Unlike excise, in excise there is no penalty for delayed payment. Only thing is installment facility is withdrawn. But under excise, they will collect penalty also. Penalty is somewhat heavy. So you have to pay. Your due date is fixed because the liability is fixed. Once the liability is fixed, due date follows automatically next month or next quarter, 6th. Okay. So, IRP whichever is earlier. So, look at another example. You have completed the service on 1st January, but you fail to issue invoice within time. So, you have done it on 2nd February. You have issued invoice on 2nd February and pay amount received on 5th February. So, in this case, date of completion, date of issue of invoice and date of payment. Sequence is same, date of completion, date of issue of invoice and date of payment. But what is relevant here is, you have taken more than 30 days, 1st January to 2nd February. So, because you have taken more than 30 days, this grace period is not available. Then service is issues, invoice is said to be issued on date of completion itself. So, 1st January will be due date. Tax liability arises not here but here. So, this became irrelevant. So, date of completion is 1st January and service tax liability arose on 1st January because you have not issued invoice within 30 days of completion. So, here this grace period is lost because of this, then automatically the due date will be February 6. For the liability of January is to be discharged in the next month, that is February 6. Okay, this is a second situation. So, where invoice is not issued within 30 days of time, within the stipulated time, then the service tax liability arises on the date of completion instead of date of issue of invoice, because the date of issue of invoice becomes irrelevant. Next, so it may so happen service was completed on 1st January, invoice was issued on 2nd February, but amount say 2014 and amount received was 10th December 2013. Let us assume 1st January 2014, 2nd February 2014, not 2nd February, I will change this also. 25th January 2014, but the amount has been received in advance because it is in 2013 the amount was received. On 10th December amount was received. Then how do you determine the tax liability and the due date? This is point of completion and this is point of issue of invoice, invoice issued, and this is point of completion. So, sorry, payment. So, you have received payment here. Here payment is first, payment received in December and completed in January 1st, and here invoice has been issued on January 25th. So, the payment first here, because the payment is first and invoice has been issued. So, date of completion and date of invoice both are irrelevant now, and it is also irrelevant whether the invoice was issued within 30 days or not, that is also irrelevant. So, as far as this payment is concerned, whether it is partial or full, whatever it is, to the extent of amount received, not on the whole amount. So, service tax is to be paid. So tax liability arose in December. On December 10th, the due date will be January 6. So service tax is to be paid on January 6 to the extent of the amount received. So payment or issue of invoice, whichever is earlier, and instead of invoice, date of completion becomes relevant only where it is being issued after the completion of service. So where payment is received in advance, date of completion and date of invoice become irrelevant to that extent. But to the extent of amount received, let me have a small practical example. Let us take a practical example, then we can have better understanding. X, a service provider, provides service to Y, or say Y Limited, makes no difference. Date of agreement for a service of 45 lakhs. The value of service is 45 lakh. Date of agreement is 11th November. So on 11th November there was agreement, and it so happened advance received from the service receiver is rupees 20 lakh. So 20 lakh rupees has been received as advance on 10th December. Okay. So on 11th there was agreement, on 10th December in one month you received advance also, but you received advance 20 lakhs. Date of completion of service. Date of completion of service. So it is 20th February next year, obviously. You have completed the service 20th February. Amount received rupees 30 lakhs on 10th March next year, obviously. Rest became a bad debt. The rest became a bad debt. So what is the tax liability? What is the due date? From this it should be very clear. It is a case where you have received advance. So how to take? First thing is, look at this transaction. Date of agreement, it has no significance. They have agreed. There was an agreement to provide and receive service. But advance received, tax liability arose